But when you did that, then down at the bottom of the screen, there were all the little icons. But I think so. This is your water.
Okay.
And these are your cookies for when you do it.
Afterwards.
I'm going to move them over there because the microphone. I want you to be able to clear path to the microphone.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming. My name is Ivana Lučića. I'm the assistant. I'll be your host today, and I'm an assistant at the Department of Information and Communication Sciences here at the faculty, and a member of Chair of Archival and Documentation Sciences. I would like to welcome you to celebration of 40 years of the Chair of Archival and Documentation Sciences. We have, of course, prepared some refreshments, some coffee, so please do not hesitate to help yourself. This celebration is being live streamed on YouTube, so I'd like to welcome our online guests also. First of all, we will have a few welcome speeches, and after our invited lecture, you will have the opportunity to participate in the discussion. I also invite you to hang out with our lecturers after the event in the informal atmosphere. So without further ado, I would like to invite the head of the Department of Information and Communication Sciences, Associate Professor Vedran Juričić, to welcome you all.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Hello, everyone. I wish you a warm welcome on behalf of the Department of Information and Communication Sciences. I was already introduced. I am delighted that we are all here to celebrate 40th anniversary or birthday of Chair of Archival and Documentation. The chair is one of 8 chairs within our department, which is one of the biggest, I think, at the faculty, not just by the number of chairs, but the number of students, courses, academic staff, and scientific fields that we cover. We also offer studies at all 3 levels. One of our 5 graduate studies is information science with an emphasis on archival science. As I remember, when it all started, there were only a few students enrolled. It was, I would say, a tough time for this study, but today the situation is better. The number of students is equal or nearly equal as for other studies. This is only one fact or one proof of many of the excellent work of this chair and its head, Professor Hrvoje Stančić. So thank you, Professor Stančić. Thank you, Hrvoje. Thank you all for coming, and once again, welcome.
Thank you, Vedran. Now I would like to invite Professor Hrvoje Stančić, Chair of the Archival and Documentation Sciences, to say a few words on our past, present, and future.
Thank you, Željko. Thank you, Vedran. Dear colleagues and friends, I would like to welcome you at the University of Zagreb Faculty of Humanities and Social Sciences, where we are celebrating the first 40 years of the Chair of Archival and Documentation Sciences. In the same year, the faculty is celebrating its 150th anniversary. Before we start with the invited lecture, it is my honor to say a few words about the history of the chair, which is inseparable from the history of the Department of Information and Communication Sciences, comprising, as Vedran has rightly pointed out, of 8 chairs. But it was not always like this. The first 2 chairs, librarianship, founded in 1976 at the Department of Comparative Literature, and social humanistic informatics, founded in 1978 at the Department of Linguistics, merged merged with the newly founded chairs of archival science and museology to form the Department of Information Sciences in 1984. The first students were enrolled in academic year of 1986-87. At this occasion, I would also like to acknowledge our former chairs, Professor Ivan Kampuš, Professor Miroslav Kržak, and Professor Jadranka Lasić-Lazić. They have left an important mark in our history and development. Today, as we have heard already, the Department of Information nowadays and Communication Sciences has 8 chairs. Those are Archival and Documentation Sciences, Book and Publishing, Informatics, Knowledge Organization, Librarianship, Museology and Heritage Management, and Natural Language Processing, Lexicography, and Encyclopedic Science. The chair of Archival and Documentation Sciences activities focus on scientific research related to the contemporary archival paradigm. Since its establishment, the chair has constantly participated in the research at national and international levels following global research trends. Today, the research topics include digitization, management of digital documents and records, information sources and systems. Then topics related to the establishment and organization of digital archives, long-term digital preservation, with a special focus on research into the issues of preserving authenticity, reliability, integrity, and usability of digital records. For a long time, chairs struggled with the number of personnel, employing external associates. Although the situation is improved today, there is still room to grow. Despite that, and with the help of the members from other chairs and the department, we are organizing, I can modestly say, the most advanced study of archival science in Croatia. Besides teaching at undergraduate, graduate, and postgraduate levels, the chair members organized the one-year professional development for the study, one-year professional development study for the Croatian radio television personnel. 2 generations of students successfully graduated and received their certificates. The chair members participate at the cutting-edge international transdisciplinary research projects like a Slovenia-Croatia Trans-Border Cooperation Project Heritage Live, then European Coordinating Initiative Digital Preservation Europe, as well as 2 inter pares projects initiated and led by Luciana Duranti from the University of British Columbia, where we focus on the research on the records in the cloud, blockchain technologies, and artificial intelligence applied to the archives. We are proud on our close cooperation with the relevant national institutions like Croatian State Archives, the State Archives in Croatia, the State Archives in Zagreb, Osijek, and Dubrovnik, just to mention a few. We were also engaged by the Ministry of Culture and Media to participate in the working groups tasked to develop a new Croatian archival legal regulations, national digitization strategy, as well as the national e-culture portal. The chair also provides advice to the industry. For a cloud service provider in Croatia, we initiated the project called Harmonization of the Business Operations with the relevant standards for the safe and legally valid long-term data retention, during which we have successfully transferred results of the academic research from the field of archival science to the business sector. Members of the chair were also invited to consult the publication office of the European Commission on the topic of preservation of authenticity of digitally signed records during their long-term preservation, as well as to organize a short professional development workshop for the Records Management Office of the International Atomic Energy Agency in Vienna. In future, the chair plans to continue participating in advancing the field of archival science through national and international research, as well as bringing back the research results to the students and the profession. Following this vision, it is my pleasure to welcome our highly esteemed guests today, lecturers Charles Dollar, Laurie Ashley, and Milovan Mišić. Thank you.
Thank you, Hrvoje. Well, we are getting closer to the invited lecturers, but first of all, I would like to invite Associate Professor Arian Rajh to introduce our speakers.
Thank you, Jacob. Charles Dollar holds a PhD in history from the University of Kentucky and is a fellow of the Society of American Archivists and the Association of Image and Information Management. In 2005, he received the Emmett Lee Award for outstanding contributions to the information and records management profession. Noteworthy publications include The Impact of Information Technologies on Archival Principles and Methods from 1992 and Authentic Electronic Records, Long-Term Access Strategies, published in 1999, both of which received awards from the Society of American Archivists. And I'd like to add that his book, Archival Science and Information Technologies, was translated to Croatian language by Croatian National Archives and published in 1999. While on the staff of the National Archives from 1974 to 1994, Mr. Dollar led the machine-readable records program and played a major role in research projects on technology standards, storage media, integrity validation, and imaging applications related to long-term access to digital records. In 1994, he joined the graduate faculty of the School of Library, Archival and Information Studies at the University of British Columbia. 5 years later, he became an independent consultant and in 2007 began collaborating with Laurie Ashley on a variety of projects, including development of the digital preservation capability maturity model as the most recognizable maturity model in archival science, as a gap analysis tool for assessing an organization's digital preservation readiness. Charles is currently wrapping up work on a book entitled Mississippi Heroes, White Champions of Civil Rights from 1954 to 1974. Laurie Ashley is a strategic, innovative, and results-driven professional who excels in cross-functional collaborative environments at defining and implementing solutions for effective and efficient lifespan management of valued information assets. She's versed in standards and best practices for records management and information governance and long-term digital preservation. She's also highly skilled at educating and engaging stakeholders, ranging from end users to business management, and from legal compliance to executive leadership for international and US private, public, and non-profit organizations and institutions. Since 2003, she is a principal consultant at Turnesol Consulting LLC, where she co-developed 4 continuous improvement methodologies, including the Digital Preservation Capability Maturity Model and web-based Digital OK.org self-assessment tool. Some of her previous engagements included taking the roles of industry market development manager at Preservica, a well-known company in a domain of long-term preservation, and statewide data forms and records coordinator at the state of Wisconsin. She's a member of several associations, including ARMA International, Society of American Archivists, and International Council on Archives. And now, our last speaker, Milovan Mišić. He's an internationally recognized expert with over 25 years of experience in the areas of document and information management. He's working closely with public and private organizations in development strategies and optimization of information technologies in line with current legal, regulatory, and business requirements. He holds an MA Information Management in International Organizations from the Pacific Western University, United States of America. He worked in Geneva, New York, Washington, D.C., Ottawa, Rome, etc. But most importantly, for the Council of Europe, EDQM, related to regulations of medicines, for the International Atomic Energy Agency, and since 2015, he provides records management expert support for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Finance, and National Archives in Belize. Regarding his professional affiliations, since 2009, he is a co-founder and a chair of UN's Documentum Working Group of International Organizations and UN Managers of Archives and Record Services. Also, he is co-chair of the International Council of Archives Expert Group on Records Management, and he served as president of ICA's section of international organizations. As a part of 2014 global initiative of the International Council on Archives, Milovan initiated an international project for low-resource environments by developing the mobile archive standardization tool MUST, which we will see later. And now finally, it's time to hear from our highly and their dear esteemed guest lecturers. Thank you. The floor is yours.
Now you gotta-
Oh, yeah. Thank you. Thank you, thank you. Well, my colleagues and I are delighted to have the opportunity to be here and to have some small part in your celebration. This is not my first visit to Croatia, but more about that perhaps later. I want to begin my part of this conversation about digital preservation, long-term digital preservation, with a little bit of personal history, because I'm trained as a historian, and yet I've practiced as an archivist, even being on the faculty at the University of British Columbia. In any event, I began my career working on a PhD at the University of Kentucky, and I was one of the first few people to use computers and statistics in historical research. And that's what started me in the direction of archival science, although I did not realize it at the time. In any event, I met the archivist of the United States, James Burton Rhodes, at a conference where I'd given a paper. He liked it. And eventually, by 1974, that led me to the National Archives of the United States, where I organized what was then called the Machine Readable Records Archives Division, later became the Electronic Records Archives Division. My work there, when I first started, compelled me to begin to focus on digital preservation, because in 1974, the United States Census faced a major issue with the 1960 census. And part of my staff had gone out to the Census Bureau and had done a survey. And the gist of it was, in 1960, the United States Civil Service Bureau was the first agency to use commercial computers for processing census returns. And it was a UNIVAC 1105, 29 feet long, weighed about 30 tons, and had a very short memory. As a matter of fact, any cell phone today was probably 10 or 12 times more powerful. In any event, by 1974, the old UNIVAC system was obsolete. And what were they going to do with their digital information? They scanned, microfilm scanned the returns or questionnaires and turned those into digital format. So we faced the issue of how to help the Census Bureau transfer content from obsolete tape drives to what was then called IBM compatible tape drives. It cost a lot of money for the Census Bureau to do this, but it was part of its federal responsibility and heritage. And so that pushed me into digital preservation. I thought at first I was going to be dealing with access issues. No, long-term preservation. And so that eventually led me into,
This one's just to show that
I'm sorry, I didn't start these out.
it's all serious business, but around the world when we've gotten together, we've had some fun around
Okay,
it.
okay.
So
Sorry
Go
about
ahead.
this. So,
there you go.
in any event, it moved me in the direction of technology standards, and that then evolved into my eventually working with the International Council on Archives, on the Automation Committee, and working with a technical committee from ISO. I think, if I can remember it correctly, it's TC 171 18942 on long-term preservation of documents requiring long-term access. So I've had a little bit of work in this area. One of the problems in all of this for me was that I understood theory because I actually published, the University of Macerata published a book, but I had worked closely with Luciano Durante at the University of British Columbia, and I think I had a pretty good understanding of the theory and principles of archival science. But how do you translate those into long-term preservation that is generally applicable? So I began trying to deal with that issue and started looking at technology neutral standards. And this really dates me when I tell you that the initial standards were SGML, Standard Generalized Markup Language, and XML, Extensible Markup Language, just for documents. And it was cumbersome to try to put together what was called a document type definition that would explain the logical structure of a document. So that was my start, but it wasn't quite good enough. And in the early 2000s, I began working as a consultant for a Chicago consulting company. And one of the projects that came my way was the Delaware Public Archives. I've got to catch up with myself. Okay. All right. Oh, I'm sorry about this, but I have to get back. I better pay more attention to my. Oh, this is the one. Okay. All right. At the Delaware Public Archives, because I had been working and dealing with issues of preservation, at least at the National Archives, and then at the University of British Columbia. But there was an issue that technology changes and preservation, digital preservation, becomes an ongoing activity. So in 2007, I became a consultant for the Delaware Public Archives. And they have a long history of public records, historical records dating back to the colonial times. And they have a lot of genealogy records that are of interest to other people. But they also recognized that their world of the public archives of Delaware was changing. And so they knew they had to address some of the issues of long-term access to those electronic records that were being created by Delaware public agencies. And so I was asked to become a consultant to the Delaware Public Archives. And my own intellectual development, as it were, had reached the point where I had begun reading about OAIS, the Open Archival Information Systems, which had been developed by space agencies, international space agencies. And as I looked at it, I thought, maybe this is a tool that can be used. And so that's exactly what I started doing. And the roots so far as my engagement are concerned, and the digital preservation capability model began in this model you see up here. And some of it is maybe not clear to you. AIPS, SIPs, DIGS. That's a terminology that's particular to the organization that created it, so you don't pay attention to it. But essentially, what you're seeing on the left side is ingest, bringing stuff in. In the middle is where the preservation occurs, archival information packages, and then access on the right side. And above this is infrastructure and technology processes. So this began to force me to think more critically and carefully about what to do. But that was not good enough, because I came across the Carnegie Mellon University software capability maturity model. Started reading about this, and you can see from the slide that there are incremental levels of capability. And I began to think, well, I wonder if we could relate those levels of capability to the OAS model, or at least the outline of that model. And so that's where the digital preservation capability model began, right here. And here's some things about it, because there are levels, virtually what's called nominal, virtually no capability, but as the organization builds up its infrastructure and its technology processes, incremental levels can be achieved till you get to the highest level, presuming you have the necessary resources. And one of the things that this helped me focus on was it could help establish priorities for an archival digital preservation program for a small organization like the Delaware Public Archives, or it could be extrapolated to a larger organization or archives, or even to a consortium of archives. So what we have here is I'm sorry. Let me go back. It's been a long time since I've done a PowerPoint slide.
You're doing great.
I know. Well, I usually stand up and walk around. But anyway, this is the model, are the capability maturity models that I developed.
There you go.
And here is the digital preservation capability maturity models. Across the top is infrastructure. Included in that would be digital preservation strategy, policy, access, the people who create the records, the people who will be the users of the records, all part of that. Then in the middle, you have the digital preservation, and at the bottom, there are the processes, digital technology processes that make this happen, so that on the right side of the screen, you can see output. This is to a community of interested users. So that's that part of the model. And here are the components. They're fairly clear forward. The only one I'm not going to talk very much about, well, technical expertise. No, excuse me, I want to deal with policy, because that's a foundation for infrastructure and for the preservation program itself. And policy is, and generally is something that can be done at a relatively low cost, because there are policies nowadays that are widely available. You can pick from whatever piece you want and build your own unique policy. On the right side of the screen, the processes, a couple of things that are important. Ingest, which means we're bringing the documents in, And one of the key things that Gloria and I have found, and others also, is that if your records or documents that are in some obsolete format, it's going to be terribly costly to convert them, to migrate them to a new format, the software dependency issue. So what we have been trying to sell, and this links in closely with information governance and electronic records management, that is to encourage the creators of electronic records, of digital records, that when they do this, they do it in a way that the documents and other associated information objects are preservation ready. That means they are in an open standard technology format at or near the point of creation. The other point I want to make involves digital object integrity, and I was glad to hear that reference to authenticity and integrity. So how in the world can you ensure the integrity of digital records when they undergo some kind of format transformation, the bits change, underlying bits change? How can you ensure that what you now have is exactly matches the appearance, format, structure, and content of digital objects? So I concluded that the best way to deal with this is the way some internal computer processings now function, is that they do a checksum when digital content is transferred, let's say from a USB drive to a hard disk drive. It periodically checks and verifies, yep, we got that bit stream correct. So that notion gave rise, of course, to my learning about hash digest technology and how useful that can be to ensure the integrity and reliability of digital content over time. It happens that you can use a hash digest of 16, 32, or 64 bits that will create a unique digital fingerprint of a single page, multiple pages, a database, so that you can, at some subsequent point in the future, you can use that same hash digest algorithm and reproduce or guarantee that when the same hash digest algorithm is produced, that you have verified content. And this, in a way, works somewhat like the way, I guess, the quality assurance codes work. You can use, I guess, a quality assurance code and attach it to a document or a body of documents. But the notion is that there is attached to the document a hash digest, multiple hash digests, if there are transformations that occur over time. So it leads us to here we are right now with the digital integrity metrics.
One more. There you go.
There you go. Well, let me see. I have to look at this. All right. There are these levels going from virtually nothing to various hash digest and including digital time stamping. If you really want to do a top level instance of ensuring, documenting the integrity and trustworthiness of digital objects that have undergone some kind of internal bit stream at some point, either during media, not necessarily in media, but when there is a format transformation that occurs. So this is the model, and we think it's useful. I hope you think it's useful too, because it provides a standardized base for assessing the capability that an organization has. And that enables that organization to develop an aspirational aspect of saying, we are at this level and we believe we need to move up to level 3 or to level 5. What resources are required to achieve that level? So you can assemble this together and put together an improvement plan, which is what happened with the Delaware Public Archives. And this is about where I want to conclude my observations in this conversation, other than to say that I did develop a roadmap, detailed levels of accomplishment. I also showed them where they were, which sometimes did not make people happy. Anyway, I'm turning it over to my colleague, Laurie Ashley, who's done all the hard work. Thank you.
Well, you can see why I might have been attracted to the work that Charles was doing long before I met him. I mean, he's still enthusiastic and passionate about this topic, as I was, but from a slightly different angle. So Charles and I joined the same consulting firm. He was, near the end of his professional career. I was still somewhere in the middle, but had figured out, spending a lot of time with utility companies, gas and electric, nuclear, that there was an issue about transitioning to electronic records that was going to hit the fan at some point in time, because utilities, one, they're a business that everyone depends on to live, right? They have very complicated systems. They have a very large geographic footprint. They have a lot going on, and they were, quickly converted to electronic technology. So I was in the utility industry in Y2K, when everyone thought all the lights were going to go out and panic would ensue across the world. Well, what I witnessed was the IT department didn't really know everything it had. They didn't know what applications had been put on their systems. They didn't know, the condition of the content. And I thought, well, electronic records are pretty complicated and challenging, and this seems like a good place to spend some time. So around the time that I met Charles and we were working in the consulting business, a lot was going on, right? The NDSA had levels of digital preservation. There was the criteria for trustworthy repositories. I went to Cornell University for a workshop. There was the ISO standard. So, the world, certain parts of it were beginning to understand that this was a challenge, that there was work to be done. There were important people to convince that there were resources needed. And I think, too, what was going on, the transition in the archival training of, you better be ready for when you get to the job, you're going to need, the technology skills, and you're going to encounter the incoming content, which is sort of a bit out of control, right? The users are doing their thing. It comes to the archive and, it's a handoff, right? And the archives has to deal with obsolete formats and other things that are going on. So as I said, I had worked for a number of years in utility companies where it takes a long time to build infrastructure. The infrastructure operates for many decades of time. There are system upgrades that have to happen. So they're complicated systems. And one of the resources that Charles and I came upon around 2007 was a long-term archive study that had been done by the storage network folks. So these are people that were in large academic institutions, in research institutions, and were building gigantic data sets, and were concerned about storage and what was going to go on. And so we sort of had started a conversation with a lot of people. Well, how long is long-term? When do you start worrying, right? And the utility industry provides some very good examples. So we had a nuclear power plant in Wisconsin. It operated from 1973 to 2013. It probably took at least 10 or 15 years of planning before the plant went live. It was decommissioned in 2013. And because of the regulation, the major decommissioning activities were not scheduled to begin until 2069 and expected to close in 2073. You're basically talking about, for a single nuclear facility, you're talking about probably 3 generations of engineers, right? And engineers we know are fairly standardized and systematized. But what was the plan? How well were they thinking about what was going to be needed for a generation of engineers that hadn't been born when this thing probably was decommissioned? So Charles and I, in our work, used this question, which we posed to, many records managers about how long is long term, with the idea that they could go to their IT staff and say, well, what is the plan for the system? You know you're going to decommission it at some point. Are you aware of what content is in it that will have to survive past the life of the system? And this long-term archival study came out with a consensus that anything beyond 10 or 15 years was long-term. And we constantly got the question of what is long-term, because the records managers especially wanted to be able to go back to their organizations and say, we need to worry about these things. They had a record retention schedule which told them how long record series would be kept. If you matched it to the system and you thought, well, what is the capability of this system to meet the requirement of the retention? So we were trying to push the conversation. So as Charles said, we joined up and did consulting engagements. City of Toronto was one of the first ones to recognize that they had to do something, and their IT staff was right at the table. They were very interested. They were very keen on, we know we're going to need to make provisions. And so they used the model in 2010, one of the first ones. We then had an engagement which has continued for over 15 years with the Council of U.S. State Archives. So that's the 56 U.S. archives and territories. And they used the self-assessment, all of the organizations, to see where they were. And when they first did it, it was dismal. The average score was nothing, nominal. The historical archives, the state archives, like the Delaware Public Archives, had no resources, had no money, had no engagement, had no awareness from the resource allocators that this tsunami of digital content was coming in their direction, and they didn't have the means to take care of it. So we worked on the State Electronic Records Initiative. Charles and I worked for quite a while for the Church Pension Group, which is the medical trust and insurance for the U.S. Episcopal Church. And when we first met with them to do a retention schedule, they had over 150 permanent record classes. Okay, fine. You want to save all that stuff? What are you going to do, right? And what they ran into, they never kept a master index of all their policy coverages. And so when the sexual misconduct lawsuits began to hit the church community, they did not in their own possession have the records which told them what the policies covered. So going into court, if you can't produce your own policy, you're then subject to whatever information others have, and they will set the tone for the liability. So we did studies for North Dakota, for the Kansas State Archives, for the Wyoming State Archives. So we were making some headway in the state archives community. And then over the years, we presented at ARMA International and AIM. We took every opportunity to run workshops. Milovan invited us to ICA. We did workshops for ARMA Canada, all trying to have this conversation about, mostly to records managers, to say you have a record retention schedule, match it to where the systems are that hold the content, and anything that your organization agrees is long-term and potentially at risk, then sit down, use the model to define how we're going to deal with this. What is our policy? Are we going to require a user to conform to an open standard technology format, or are we just going to accept whatever they give us when it hits the archive's door and go from there? And my background is in business strategy, so it's not, I've worked with many organizations that don't have an archive. They have long-term records, permanent records, but they don't have anyone with the skill set of archivists or librarians who are trained. They have IT people, and they have records managers, and they have a lot of lawyers. So what we saw in the records management community was a recognition of the liability of things you couldn't access, things you couldn't control. Unfortunately, I think for about 10 years, they focused on how do we get rid of the things that are at risk to us. And so the topic was defensible disposition. I wish it had been long-term preservation, They had focused on the most important things and what they were going to do. What they focused on was all the content stores they couldn't control that worried them, and how are we going to persuade the organization to get rid of this stuff so that if we have a lawsuit, it doesn't cause us millions of dollars in fines and reputation damage. So over this period of time, through the organizations that were listening to us and talking to us, the model evolved. We got some pushback on certain sorts of points. We kept talking to other stakeholders. When PTAB came first to offer a workshop on the standard, which was about auditing trustworthy repositories, I was there because I wanted to know, okay, where are these trustworthy repositories? Who said that they're going to line up and conform to this ISO standard? Who's got all the parts and pieces in place? Who's making the commitment from a resource standpoint? So we just kept working. We had this beautiful color chart for when you use the components, you came out with a score, and Arian used it. That's how I met Arian. And it's true what Charles said, that people don't like bad scores. If you take the score and you come out with we're a 6 on a score of 64, and you show that to your leadership, it makes them very uncomfortable. And that was the whole point. You need to understand this. Your IT people need to understand you can't just shut off an application or throw it over the fence, because there's never enough money to do that. You need to sit down and do these things, which is recognize who are the designated communities that are going to need this content, that are counting on you to do the right thing. Where's the policy, the strategy? Where's the repository? Because IT people are not trained in trustworthy repositories. They're trained in a lot of other things. And so we just sort of kept talking largely through the records management community. And then COSA, the Council of State Archivists, asked us if we could convert the model into a self-assessment. And that was the formation of Digital OK, which is available today as a public free application. And so people can take it, they come up with a score, and it allows them to have a conversation in their organization to push for how are we going to do, what's most important to us? What condition are our systems in? How are we going to get better at this? And so luckily we were asked to publish articles in a few places here and there and kind of keep the conversation going. We had some interest from a gentleman in the Netherlands. There's Arian's scorecard. One of the most significant things was when the Texas State Archives, you all know about Texas, big state in the US, they had been trying for years, and they have a very competent state archivist, have been trying for years to get money from the legislature. And it was when the governor left office after 13 years, and there was this collection of all sorts of digital content, when they and he was at the time, was he running for president? Did he run for president? Yeah. So he had a very high, profile. And so of course they were going to get questions and requests for access to his material when he was governor. Finally, after many, many years of asking, the Texas State Library and Archives was given $800,000 in order to advance the effort of trying to save the governor's electronic records. So the Digital OK, we've been used by many different folks, different titles, over 200 organizations, many times, just over in the corner, just trying it on their own so that they can see where they are and begin to have those conversations to move things forward. You mentioned in my biography that I joined Preservica, which is known as a long-term digital preservation software house. And it's because I really wanted, after working with Charles and consulting, I really wanted to get behind the technology that was enabling digital preservation. So I was there for 4 years, and these are some of the assets that I created, still talking to records management about why they should care, trying to support archivists who weren't getting enough resources, just basically trying to stir the pot, raise the flag, jump on the soapbox to say this is something that every organization, small, big, public, private, needs to deal with. Even if your collection is tiny, even if you have an archive to send these things to, you still have got to make a plan for transfer, for access. And so I've had a wonderful career, in large part to this connection that I made with Charles at a pivotal time in my history. But the work continues. I mean, after all that we've done and all the good things that you're doing, and many other archivists around the world, There's still GPO in the United States, the Government Publishing Office, is the only repository in the world at the moment certified to ISO or conforming to the ISO certified standard. I mean, all of us can think of dozens and dozens of repositories of content, whether it's your bank, your retirement fund, medical records, your children's school records, that we want to be trustworthy digital repositories. And we're still a very long way. For me, I was just about to retire, but I've joined the government of the state of Vermont, very tiny little state in the northeast of the country. They're very last at making electronic their land records. And so I've joined the staff of the Archives and Records Administration, again, as a change agent, as somebody who's just trying to stand on the soapbox, encourage people to do the right thing, and do good digital preservation. So thank you.
Okay. Poštovane kolege i prijatelji, prvo bih želeo da vam čestitam na vašoj godišnjici. And then I have to switch to English so that they don't think that I'm doing something behind their back, because they're long-term friends. Yeah. Talking about the archives records management, number one, I want to mention that I met Charles Dollar back in 1985. So next year we will celebrate 40 years of our friendship. And that was not only several years ago or several decades ago. Our friendship started not even only last century, it started last millennium. So it's a long time, right? While GDPR is in full implementation throughout European Union, I don't want to go beyond disclosing details about my friendship with Hrvoje and others. I do know Arian and Hrvoje for a little while, and we discussed a lot of things related to your curriculum, to our intentions, and so on. So the little difference from Charles and Laurie, I was working my entire life in international organizations, mainly in United Nations, some international banks, World Bank, IMF, and so on. So my life was all around the globe. And then the discussion is lately moving into artificial intelligence and implementation of technologies that are actually sort of natural development from blockchain technologies and so on. So something that we are really doing from Charles' initial research and discovery into implementation of the latest technology. So let me rewind the tape quickly and go back to a topic. So far, I did not mention too much words like archives, records management, archiving. It's mostly technology. So basically, while great, beautiful mind of Charles Dollar was developing a comprehensive digital capability assessment model, and Laurie was pushing implementation in various areas of the United States and across the border in Canada. My view was to try to push the same concept worldwide. And the idea was to squeeze almost 40 minutes of presentation into mobile phone. So everything that they've done, with those beautiful, great graphs and charts and concepts and so on, with the technology that everybody is holding in our hands, in our pockets, purses. We tried to, the idea was actually with agreement with two of them.
Yeah.
And they were staring at me and they said, well, that's almost impossible because it's a lot. And I said, okay, fine, well, let me try. So we were skeptical at the beginning. My appetite was not limited to that. So basically, we do have a digital preservation capability maturity model in the app. And I also added a couple of more things like education standards, communication to the ICA, International Council on Archives, and so on. So the functionality was supposed to cover the assessment tool, ISO standards, training as well. I did have some cooperation with Webster University. The reason for that, they're worldwide. They have their offices or universities around the globe. So there is education component in the system. The records tool, I was working with, I'm glad that you're in touch with University of British Columbia and you're working with Interpares and so on. So one of the software tools for records management was Canadian open text documentum. FDA is filing, people are filing all applications for new drugs through that and so on. And the app is supposed to be also a good information resource. It was easy between three of us, but then to put everything in place, I did have to obtain consensus of the entire International Council on Archives with sections from university and parliament section and parliamentarian and so on to sectional international organizations. So we got their blessing to move on, and under the auspices of International Council on Archives, we created the tool called MAST that basically stands for Mobile Archives Standardization Tool. Now, as I said, it does have a couple of areas, information, and then the assessment tool. So everything that Laurie and Charles were talking about is in those two little buttons in red in the middle. But we also added standards so that we have sort of education tool for whoever Laurie was approaching. They can have it on a click over there. And also the latest news from the Council on International Council on Archives and other areas. In essence, three of us worked together to convert the entire digital preservation capability maturity model into screen of the phone. So electronic record survey starts with ingest, the archival storage, media integrity, security, and so on and so forth. So basically, you click on one button, you have this, there is a questionnaire on right-hand side, easy, really, you do it on the phone, and then you get a list of your answers. You can obviously go quickly back, correct something, answer all these questions, whether I have email archiving, I don't have it, do I have policy, do I have intention in my organization or not, and so on. And then you get a score. As Laurie mentioned, the score was almost zero in most cases. Hrvoje was participating, and I was also working with Arian, and I said, oh gosh, I mean, the score is low. And I said, well, just go back, click another button, you will have high score. Well, that's not true, we don't have everything in place. Okay, fine. And so you get that. So the idea was, well, you have the score, you don't like it, you scratch your head, you go back, and you have to be truthful and tell actually your institution, your organization, your university, hey guys, we don't have any of these, and this is the standard, we need to have that. So you click on that, you get a score, and the score goes from your mobile to those three guys on the screen and in front of you, and they're supposed to review and tell you in a friendly manner, hey guys, okay, we can help you, or we can, well, you're hopeless, we can do nothing. But that was basically the idea. So I took the mobile phone to the government of Belize. Belize is a small country south of Yucatan Peninsula, Cancun, you heard of that. So you go a little bit south, you hit Central America. Belize is the country, probably not even well known, but it's important because they have the largest coral reef after the Great Barrier Reef in Australia. That's at the other side of the globe. Beautiful nature and everything. I came to their government by mistake, at one diplomatic session in London, England, where I was working there, and they said, well, we would like to see, how you can help our country. So I went there and they said, well, what is the most precious department in your government? And they said, well, first of all, we are working to automate our finance ministry. And I said, okay, fine. How about the others? And they said immigration is really crucial because people are flocking in and out of the country. I said, okay, can I see your records? So you really don't want to see that? I said, yeah, but please show me. So we are sitting in a nice room, air conditioned and so on, Belize in the middle of America. Average temperature is 33, 35 degrees, and the humidity goes up to 85, 95%, 12 months a year. They don't have snow though, so no freezing. So I said, okay, well, where are your records? They leaned me, they said, look through to the window. You see those two containers? I said, yeah, they're records. I said, can I see it? Well, we told you, you don't want to see it. Last year, we opened that and there was a water coming out together with snakes, lizards, and everything else. And I said, okay, fine. I understand everything. Let me move on. Let's set up a presentation of DPCMM, and I arranged everything. We created everything on a mobile device. And said, okay, can you show that on the tablet? And I said, yeah. Okay, can you bring any tablets from the States, from US where you are? I said, okay. So for the Department of Finance, I thought, okay, 3 or 5 people. And I said, well, we might invite the entire government. So we need about 35 of those. So, okay, no problem. I went to a shop. I said, okay, give me 35 tablets. And I said, well, what do you need it for? Is it for a military or something? Well, what are you doing? So I had to go through a few explanations, and I did get 35 tablets to Belize. And we had a wonderful 4 days training over there. Director of the National Archives, Herman Bird, was quite happy because they invited Ministry of Education, Sports and Culture, Agricultural Ministry, Forestry and Environment, Economic Development, Ministry of Finance, of course, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and so on and so forth. And it was quite successful. If you have access to the presentation, there is a hyperlink down there to YouTube, so you can see how the session was going on. Not 4 days, it's only presentation for a local TV, they have it. And it's still running regardless of the time. It was some time ago. So frankly, this is what I was doing. It was very successful. The Ministry of Finance is right now on their 8th year of fully digitized all financial transactions, including budget preparation and so on. So fully fledged archiving is implemented over there. The ISO 9000, people are coming every 2 years to review their compliance, and that also works. And the next step is Ministry of Foreign Affairs, where they want to connect all their embassies around the globe. So we are talking about high security, digitization, authenticity, fully fledged archiving with legal validation, and so on. So basically, with the government of Belize, that incremental implementation is going through the government, and I'm working over there as an advisor. But the next movement, I just came from Belize actually on Monday. So that was 4 days ago. It was nice, beautiful, very humid and very hot. But it was hot in Europe as well. And the idea that I discussed with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is that we establish a focal point for artificial intelligence for the entire Caribbean region in Belize. So apart from the concept of artificial intelligence, we are talking about 15 countries that will be involved through the sort of European Union system called CARICOM for Caribbean countries, Antigua, Barbuda, Haiti, St. Kitts, Nevis, and so on, British Virgin Islands, and so on and so forth. So basically 15 countries and 5 associated states dealing with the concept of artificial intelligence. Now, talking about old computers, obsolete technology, both hardware and software, right now we are really looking even in that region, because for them, there is no space, there is no money to move from paper through microfilm, through other types of presentation. They jumped from lizards and snakes into mobile technology, and they will definitely jump into AI technology. Now, talking about capability, we as the archivists are challenged with the volume of data in the quantum computing, and as you're aware, the main unit of quantum computing is a qubit. Up until a few years ago, the most capable quantum cryptography machine was IBM Osprey machine with 433 qubits. So that's much more than gigabyte and terabyte. I mean, it's you put like a lot of zeros in terms of volume of data. At the moment, the most powerful quantum cryptography hardware is atom computing that exceeds 1,000 qubits. And we are really talking about a huge volume of data. Now, most people are afraid of artificial intelligence, whether it will take over human mind and so on. I'm also in touch with a couple of people in CERN, which is basically atomic plant, around Geneva. Their Department of Mathematics is dealing with artificial intelligence and processing of data and so on. So they said, well, let's move on. We are building like a new facility that will be operational in 2034. So, but they have to do that. And the amount of data that they are processing, let alone just the accelerator, is humongous. So I also touched the idea whether we will be overtaken by computers. So we are talking about 433 qubits and then 1,000 right now. But doctors who are reviewing our body just confirmed that human brain has capacity of about 100 billion qubits if you use both sides of the brain. So you don't have to worry, or we don't have to worry. This is not the future, it is the present, and we should really focus on technology. I'm grateful to Hrvoje disclosing me all the curriculum, and we were talking about curriculum and how you prepare your students for the present. And this is really a lot of archival theory, the old concepts, because without that we cannot understand what do we need to do with new technologies. But it's also very rich curriculum preparing students for as a new generation to deal with digital preservation. So I do have everything on the phone. We can look at that later on. I also have a QR code that I can give you so you can download and play with it. But basically that's a conclusion that starting with really excellent concept and approach, methodical approach to dissect all the problems through the implementation and our long-term experience implementing digital preservation. Lori can just give you a few words as a conclusion of this presentation.
Well, we just talked about what sort of, as we prepared, looking back on our journey with the capability maturity model, Charles and I talked about why weren't we more successful, sort of where we went with that. So Charles, do you want to?
Oh, sure, but before that, I'd like to make a linkage between the government publishing office and integrity of records. In general, archives can focus on physical security, controlling access. But what happens, and this is where the government publishing office is concerned, is what happens when you publish documents in electronic form and someone with malicious intentions creates misinformation. How do you document that what that individual or group of individuals have done do not replicate the integrity of the object itself? And that's my hash digest technology, it seems to me, is one way to ensure the integrity within the organization with regard to technology obsolescence and addressing issues of misinformation, mishandling, and deliberate distortion of photographs and documents. So I just wanted to throw that in.
I know you
mentioned that.
You've been sitting there thinking about it.
Yes.
So I think, the one thing that we talked about is, why didn't the model become more widespread? You can see we had some impact. But I think, we weren't sponsored by an organization. We weren't coming out of the National Archives. We weren't coming out of an academic institution. And so it was us, promoting it. And so I feel pretty good about what we managed to accomplish. But some might say that we were just a pinprick in the universe. But, clearly there are challenges of resources and organizations stepping up to the plate and understanding what they need to do. And I think we found it most successfully, if there wasn't someone who was actually trained in electronic archives, things didn't move forward. And we found that in archives that they needed specialists. And so anyway, we welcome your reflections on whether we were successful, and where you're going and what.
May I add a footnote? Based on my experience with the Delaware Public Archives, tremendous plan, road plan, thud. There are a couple of reasons for that. First of all, the state library had electronic resources and the state archives had very limited, but it was a question of turf. And who controls it? Well, the archives wasn't going to let the state library control things. Secondly, there was a transition in leadership within the public archives of Delaware, and no one wanted to hear bad news. You mean we're that bad? Well, yes, but you can address that. And finally, the Delaware Public Archives, as I referenced earlier, has a lot of historical documents. And the governor, this is a small state, a little bit larger, I guess, than Vermont, but not much. But the governor and other senior leaders are interested in good, positive visibility. And there are genealogists, there are historians who want access to these documents. And the best way to provide that is digitally. So where did the money go? Scanning old documents, because that enhanced the visibility of the organization. So
The work continues.
yes, it does.
But as you have rightly put it, it's always very easy to do a self-assessment to get the scores, to make an interesting plan. But then completely other thing is to go down point by point and execute the plan in full, right?
Yes.
So it requires not only an internal effort of the staff, but also financial resources allocation. So sometimes it's not that easy. Usually it helps if it's required by law or by some higher level body of government or so. Then you'll have to do it, but then you'll also be able to ask for money to do that as well, right? I wonder, how or shouldn't I wonder how the Croatian State Archives is feeling about the maturity model?
Basically, I think not the same but similar model as the model developed and used by Australian archives. In well, and basically the same aspects of the programs are stressed. Here in Croatia, I think we don't have the attitude in our public administration to do this kind of checks, and they don't like precise numbers, even sometimes in the planning, because if you quantify your achievement or your goals, then it's something that you have to fulfill, and if you don't do the right thing, then somebody somewhere in some report there will be some line in red, and nobody likes to see red lines. I think that now, generally speaking, the situation is much better than 20 or 40 years ago, because communication between government offices, between government and business, between different service providers is necessary for the business and for government to function. So if we see what is roughly safe in our public administration, those basic data that are elementary for government functioning. And in that part of the story, I think we don't have significant losses of information. But information which is not necessary for the functioning of government or businesses for, let's say, more than 10 or more than 20 years, this information basically is likely to disappear.
And may I ask how the interest in the archival training? I mean, I think that we always tried to find IT folks, technologists, who understood the value of historical information, and you find them sort of rarely. But when they put together their computer brains with the passion for preservation of valued things that the organization or the society values, it's like a light goes off. And so I think recruiting from the technology side, as Milovan was saying, to get a bit of that passion of the archival science and to understand the discipline and the concepts, I think is a way for us to try to bridge. I mean, we have a lot of archivists who understand beautiful things and historical things. We found in our work that many of the mature archivists were challenged by coming up to speed on the technology. So I think there's young people who grew up with technology who also have a passion for archives. But I think if we could sweep some of that humongous community of technologists into the passion of preservation, we could maybe make more progress. And honestly, I think it would be good for the technologists, because some of them just get stuck being babysitters of databases. But this is living, this is live, this is a career. So I don't know if you have interrelations. We always try to attract the computer science people, but unless you get the light to go off in their minds to understand the content. But I think there's great potential there, I hope.
May I add a historic footnote?
Sure.
Laurie referenced the project we did for the city of Toronto. And I remember the presentation we made, that big auditorium, and we were making a presentation about how we would help them solve their problems. And the IT people were about midway back. I did not know that at the time, but I could tell that as I was talking, they were bored. Why am I here? But when I mentioned the digital preservation capability maturity model, and it's based on the Carnegie Mellon software capability maturity model, they perked up. And I knew right then we had the project, because the technology folks were interested and the archives folks were. And the point of that is that you may be able to generate interest within the technology community to help solve the problems. You have to have the right kinds of tools to do that. We think that the digital preservation capability maturity model is part of that solution.
Let me just give my example. We had some project intervention related to archival management while I was working at the Agency for Medicinal Products and Medical Devices. And I needed to show some data to the director of the agency and the board. And I think that DPC maturity model was a very good tool for this. So I have applied digital OK assessment, and it was very easy to implement before and after the software and project implementation. And I think that it really helped the management to comprehend some issues and some problems, and to track the project in the right way. So it was very useful.
Great.
Good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good.
Okay.
Any other?
Thank you to our speakers, and I would also like to invite anyone who has anything to ask our speakers. And of course, thank you also Milovan for the
Thank you.
Well, I don't know. It's a short one to Milovan. In Belize,
Yeah.
you said that they skipped from lizards to digital records management. So, how was the process? Was it painful, or was it easy for them to do that? Because
Well, it's interesting. I mean, when you introduce something to people who have nothing, they're ready to accept whatever is available.
Maybe that's the problem with, that are like have something, but
Yeah.
they're not mature enough. Maybe that's
Right. Well, frankly, I faced the environment over there where everybody has the cell phone, expensive one, not cheap. I mean, good cell phones. Everybody have that in the pocket. They have no TV. Maybe they don't have a car. They use horses to move from one place to another. I saw all of that, or bicycles and so on. But everybody have a cell phone. Good infrastructure, easy to build, to set up cell towers. And after a hurricane that they have every year, there is like disturbance for a couple of hours, and it's easy to put new cell towers and to reestablish the connectivity. So that was really not a problem. What Hrvoje mentioned, it's easy to implement something where there is a legislation. But my other experience is it's easy to implement something where you have a disaster. Very small caveat, I was working for World Food Program, humanitarian agency that delivers food in the case of war or natural disasters and so on. So the disaster that they did have, they had a full tanker of food, meat, pork meat. So there was someone, a pork farm, that gave a donation of pork meat. I don't know how many tons of it. And then there is obviously a transportation company that provided the ship, and someone who put the gasoline or naphtha or whatever diesel, fuel, and some other one who gave captains and all the crew, and they boarded the shore of Iraq. Well, these people don't eat pork meat. Sharks were so happy because everything went down into the sea. And they said, well, all that effort for absolutely nothing. They're still hungry people somewhere, but not right there. They cannot use it. So they said, okay, we need to do something, because they discovered that something was wrong in a protocol of documentation that they had with that particular ship. So I got a consulting job, and we moved on, and they work a little bit better. So legislation is one push. European Union has a standard, so all member states have to follow the rules and regulations, and you just wave with the flag and say, well, we need to have that. The disaster is the other one, but it is universities who are really preparing new stuff, new generation of multi-skilled archivists, records managers, or computer geeks who like the archives, or archivists who like paper, but they're keen to use computers. So that multi-skilled force is really necessary, and I'm really so happy to see your curriculum. And as I said at the very beginning, my first 5 sentences did not mention archives or records management. It was more about data and so on. The last thing I wanted to point that there was excellent experience that Charles and I had with the Smithsonian institutions in Washington, D.C., and we went through a fully fledged discussion and implementation of checksums and hash digest and so on, in terms of implementing basically computer technology in the archives to make sure that authenticity is fully preserved. So great job that you are doing. Let's cooperate and stay in touch in the future.
Of course.
Thank you.
Okay. Is there any other question from the audience? If not, please join me in thanking our guests.
Thank you.
And we can still chat informally after this. Thank you very
Okay,
much.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.